Welcome to this new edition of Eco Africa, brought to you by Germany's DW, Nigeria's Channels Television, and Uganda's NTV. Represented here on the program by my wonderful co-host, Sandra.
Well, thank you, Chris, and indeed it is good to be here again. We've got a great lineup, so let's get into it. But first, here is a quick look at what's in store. Getting the most out of what you've got. Also, how and why a lot of water goes to waste. And finally, how artists reflect the climate crisis in their work.
If you are a regular Eco Africa viewer, you would know that one thing the world has too much of is waste. And sadly, it's a problem that may not be tackled in our lifetime. But there is a very positive trend underway. More and more people are finding ways to turn waste into useful product. Our first report takes us to Cameroon, where a social startup is helping a community to save money by repurposing some of their waste.
The roadside here littered with waste. But for Hubert, it's a treasure trove. He and his team regularly head out to gather vegetable scraps in the Cameroonian community of Penja. There's no municipal waste collection, so everything ends up on the streets. For the Family Green Corporation NGO, it's a valuable resource.
We want to recycle this household waste in a useful way. It's lying around everywhere. Most of it is vegetable waste, which we can use to produce eco-friendly charcoal for lots of people. It costs less, so it's affordable for families.
The team has all the equipment they need. They use a cargo truck to bring the bags of vegetable scraps to the recycling yard. They can process hundreds of kilos of waste a month. The first step is sorting the waste. Bananas, corn stalks, as well as coconut and bamboo branches are all good for making organic charcoal. Just like the wood charcoal, the material first has to be burned. The team works to keep emissions to a minimum. The burned vegetable waste is then mixed with other organic waste and then combined with a gluey substance derived from the cassava plant. Every machine here was built by the NGO, but not every job has been automated. The last step is forming the charcoal by hand and then placing the briquettes in the sun to dry.
It's a clean, healthy fuel that doesn't smoke and can even be used in the home like gas. So it replaces butane gas. At the same time, it also helps address the waste problem in our community. And it helps in the fight against deforestation and helps address the problem of global warming.
The NGO produces some 300 kilos of organic charcoal. Some of it is sold in major cities like Douala, but most remain in nearby communities. Hubart's NGO now employs 12 people, and they all receive a good wage. The organization offers internships too. At the moment, Catherine Bilai Mbeya, a student from the coastal city of Douala, is doing an internship here.
I'm passionate about everything to do with protecting the environment, everything to do with organics. I was immediately won over by the fact that the corporation is involved in the production of biofertilizers, ecological charcoal, and biogas.
The NGO built its first biogas plants for local farmers. Now they've expanded and also manufactured them for private individuals and institutions throughout the country. Hubert has made a career out of renewable energy, and it's all because the oil industry didn't want him.
I'm a trained petroleum engineer. In 2016, after I finished my studies, it was very difficult for us to find a job in the oil industry. So together with some friends and classmates, we came up with the idea to set up an organization to promote alternatives to fossil fuels.
Along with green energy, the NGO recently added organic fertilizer to its portfolio. They use a method that is simple but very efficient. Tender green leaves are soaked in water and then mixed with other organic waste such as vegetable matter or cow dung. After several weeks, the fertilizer is ready to use. The NGO also does community outreach with farmers in schools. They hope to win farmers over to using organic fertilizer or even take part in producing it.
We've been to various schools and shown the students there how to manage waste sustainably. The young students are the foundation for the future. When they finish school, they should be inspired to contribute to this sector.
The NGO is a pioneer in Cameroon. If their ideas catch on, many more young people in the country stand to benefit, and the environment will benefit too.
One thing you absolutely cannot do without if you want to grow crops or keep livestock is water. But water is becoming an increasingly precious commodity. Fortunately, some practices can help us use water more sustainably.
Indeed, they are Chris, and it's good that there are a number of different ideas being developed because the situation varies from one country to another. Kenya, for instance, has been suffering from drought for nearly a decade. So how are farmers coping and what's being done to support them? Let's take a look.
To appreciate the scale of the drought in Kenya, you only have to look at Lake Olbolosat, which has shrunk like never before. Almost 90% of it has dried up. Climate scientists warn that the situation could get even worse.
Most climate models predict that extreme weather events, such as drought, are likely to become more frequent and more severe. At least that is mainly due to the global warming and climate change.
These images from June 2019 show the lake a few weeks after the rainy season. An important habitat for animals like the crowned crane and the hippo. The drought is a problem too for people who live in the area. Many farmers fear for their livelihood. The persistent heat wave has seen fields across the country set ablaze.
It's actually very, very, very bad. We have not had rains for almost several years. We have had several crop failures. Our plants are really not doing well. So we are really waiting for the rains.
Lake Olbolosat's years-long decline is a homemade problem. Local conservation groups say a lot of soil has been carried into the lake following deforestation and construction work. On top of that, people often draw groundwater from the area.
Part of the water in this lake comes from the hills behind me. The hills have a lot of underground water. There is no control or procedure that people there should follow to get their water.
It's vital that farmers use water in a more sustainable way. That's one of the goals of the Nairobi Water Fund. Gutters and basins mean that water can be collected during the rainy season and then used to irrigate fields.
We ensure that all the water which comes from the rooftop or maybe from the runoff are conserved in water pans. That is one of the technologies. Also, we show the farmers how to terrace their roads, especially the ones which are slopy, and ensure that those terraces are stabilized with napier grass so that they can be able to capture all the water which erodes the soil into the rivers.
The fund is already working with a network of nearly 16,000 farmers. They're harvesting enough water to irrigate almost 2,000 acres of horticultural crops over a 3-month period. David Camo is among the farmers benefiting from the project. The new methods mean he has enough water to irrigate his crops, even in times of drought, like now.
The Nairobi Water Project provided me with a water pan. And I can irrigate by using gravity to pump the water and use a sprinkler.
His farm borders a river, but Camo uses a water pan, a small reservoir, to irrigate his fields and save valuable water. Climate researchers say that sustainable farming techniques like these can help ease pressure on farmers.
Even as we go into a possible failed rainy season, we are not likely to miss out on rainfall. So we advise water conservation measures, including water harvesting and sustainable use of water.
The threat to the lake will only worsen if human activities don't change. But more sustainable water usage could help prevent it from drying up.
It is encouraging to see people find ways to use water more efficiently, but you can only do that if you have some water to begin with. In times when there is far too little rain, is there any way to actually produce more water?
Well, Sandra, that question doesn't have a simple answer. But as we're about to discover, there are other ways of harvesting water from the atmosphere. That said, we would also have a lot more to use if we paid more attention to how it's being wasted.
Heat has exacerbated an ongoing crisis in the US, water scarcity.
Water shortage has become a never-ending issue in an approaching global water crisis.
The lack of fresh water is not a future problem. Half of the global population experiences water scarcity during at least some parts of the year. Overconsumption, a heating planet and bad water management are draining our groundwater, rivers and lakes worldwide. By the middle of the century, every second country will struggle with limited access to water. To tackle this problem, we need to manage our water better. We need to reuse it and figure out ways to use less of it. But that alone may not be enough. Scientists think that we need to look beyond usual water sources like rainfall, snowfall, river runoff or groundwater. Frozen ice sheets in the Arctic store nearly 70% of all freshwater resources globally. Thousands of square kilometers of ice breaks off as icebergs every year and melts into the ocean, freshwater that is wasted.
The research has demonstrated that this opportunity does hold potential for bringing water from the northern hemisphere, where there is abundant water, to those areas where they need.
This is Mansour Kadir. He is lead scientist at the United Nations University and author of the book Unconventional Water Resources. From a technological point of view, icebergs are already towed today. Ships from the oil and gas industry are pulling small chunks away from drilling platforms. But to provide a city like Cape Town with fresh water for roughly 10 weeks, we'd need something a lot bigger. An ice mountain weighing around 125 million tons. In comparison, a large cargo vessel weighs around 200,000 tons. And instead of pulling it just a few hundred meters, it would have to be dragged thousands of kilometers. It's a huge feat, but computer simulations from 2011 have shown that this is possible. Well, theoretically. It's still a long way from flashy 3D animation to reality. One Emirati company, the National Advisor Bureau, has patented the technology to eventually pull it off. But they still lack the funding to start a pilot phase. For now, the iceberg idea is proving too big a feat to solve today's problems. So let's look to something lighter, something that can be found pretty much everywhere, like air. You know how in the morning everything is covered with small droplets? Guess what these were before? Exactly, clouds or fog. Humidity in the air becomes liquid when it cools down. That's why a cold glass of beer is wet on the outside even though no beer spilled over. In nature, this usually happens in the evening and at night when the temperatures drop. And it's possible to take advantage of this phenomenon and harvest this humidity.
So fog harvesting has been practiced by indigenous people on virtually every continent.
This is Rebecca Farnham. She's a consultant and researcher at one of the most successful fog harvesting operations globally.
You've got some kind of material. This one's nice and 3D, so it's got a lot of physical surface for the water to get stuck on. And then as fog passes through, it's just a cloud. You can kind of see the spray coming through in front of the other bigger net. And then it gets caught on this net.
Put into practice, it looks like this. On the edge of the semi-arid Ain Bam Ram region in Morocco, there is very little rain. But for 6 months, a thick fog hangs over the region. And this fog passes through 1,700 square meters of mesh, which makes it the largest fog harvesting operation in the world. The fog condenses and drips into large underground deposits from where it is distributed via pipes to people's homes. The nets collect around 35,000 liters of water every day, which fulfills the needs of more than 1,000 people and is even used to water crops. Today, there are big fog harvesting operations in Chile, Morocco, Ghana, Eritrea, Ethiopia and South Africa. But the potential is much bigger. There are suitable sites almost everywhere. A 40 square meter net that yields about 200 liters per day costs roughly $1,500.
So the communities that would benefit the most from this particular technology are also those who are kind of most marginalized within countries. So getting the attention there and the kind of startup capital where it needs to be is an uphill battle.
Although capital is needed, fog harvesting is fairly cheap, scalable, and a great solution for people living in remote areas. But it's not an option for big cities. There's simply not enough fog, and cities need more water than nets can catch. Our last solution does not seem very crazy at first. But what's crazy is the amount of water we could save by implementing it. Leaking pipes are the reason we lose nearly 30% of all fresh water globally. That's a staggering 346 billion liters a day. To put that in perspective, that's 30 times more than German households consume per day, or more than 2 billion bathtubs a year. Perfectly good water we could use to drink, wash, clean, grow food that's just being wasted.
My son called me a plumber from space, so we are basically plumbers some of the times.
This is Lauren Guy. He co-founded the tech startup Astera. Plumbers is a bit of an understatement. Astera tracks water leaks from space. They make satellite images with the help of microwaves. The microwaves are reflected differently depending on which medium they hit.
From space, we can get within the city, underneath the asphalt, into the soil, into the pipes layer. So our algorithm is actually aimed to drinking water. We can say from space if the water on this bottle, for example, came from the tap, or if it's from rain, or from something else.
They're looking for the composition of the water. If it's drinking water, they assume it's a leak. And mostly they're right. The results look like this. Every dot on this map, for example, is a leak. And here too. A leak of over 120 liters per minute detected in Prato, Italy, or in Bangkok, or in Chinese cities. Astera sells those maps to utilities globally so they know where to fix leaks and save money. Locating leaks is only the first step in a long process. Fixing one leak might create new ones because it can affect the pressure within the pipes. Improving and renewing pipes and infrastructure is key to saving water and the nearly $40 billion that are going down the drain globally year on year.
When it's a lovely day in your part of the world, it's easy to ignore news reports about the urgent need to reduce carbon emissions to slow global warming.
That's human nature, Chris. But there are also creative ways to keep people mindful of the looming ecological dangers all around the world, as we'll see in our next report on an exhibition in Germany.
If you listen carefully, you can hear it. A chorus of household appliances. Syrian performance artist Bazat Suleiman has created a memorial-like installation out of a pile of electronic waste. The work is currently on display here at the Kunsthalle Mannheim. In an exhibition called 1.5 Degrees, artists from all over the world explore how the climate crisis is affecting our lives.
We see ourselves confronted by a situation where the lifestyle that we humans nurture and that has accelerated over the last few decades has led us into a crisis. And at this time, we think it's important to address this topic, while also showing that art is an important medium for dealing with this question, and one that can inspire us to reflect.
Emerson Pontes is an artist, a biologist, and an educator. In his performances, his alter ego, Uriah Sodoma, draws attention to the destruction of his homeland, the Brazilian Amazon. He slips into the role of a plant-human hybrid, shape-shifting into different situations. Performance artist Thomas Kleiner has dedicated his work to new forms of movement, especially in the air. He works with discarded old parachutes.
Alles gerät in Bewegung, Klimawandel.
Everything is moving. Climate change means that everything has to shift. And then came the question, is there perhaps the possibility of plants moving in new ways? And now the project Cross-Species Test Flights is particularly focused on this moment of floating. For example, I've tried to record the movements of jellyfish, or something like the constellation of flying objects with plants, so that they become a new living entity.
A not so simple approach, perhaps. Thomas Kleiner plans to be on site frequently for the duration of the exhibition. The visitors are his observers.
It's becoming more and more important for us humans to make use of nature as a wind that always blows in order to simply live more ecologically in this world, to make our ecological footprint a little smaller.
For the curator, these are particularly important exhibits. Images by the German-Austrian artist Anselm Kiefer. One picture shows the historical observatory in the Indian city of Jaipur. The artist has replaced the staircase there with a ladder that seems to lead directly into the heavens.
In the night sky, you see many white dots, stars, and he pinpoints these stars with coordinates from NASA. So it's actually a mixture, on the one hand, of our technological westernized knowledge, and on the other hand, of the old tradition of stargazing, as it was cultivated in India, in the city of Jaipur. It has an insanely rich cultural history.
Right next to it are drawings by Eva Gentner. The abundance of satellites and space debris now orbiting our planet has inspired the artist to create entirely new constellations. One of the highlights of the exhibition is the crocheted coral reef by the Australian twin sisters Margaret and Christine Wertheim. But the theme is not the dead atolls of their homeland. Through an appeal, they found 4,000 crocheting comrades in arms to help them create this coral reef. The message: climate change mitigation is a task that, like this reef, can only be mastered together.
I think it's often a fine line between art and the artificial, and that it's only when the beauty of nature has almost disappeared that we begin to recreate it artificially, and that's kind of crazy.
You have to pull out all the stops to raise awareness, and maybe that's also a way to cope with it yourself, to process what has gone wrong in the course of many decades, and what is still going wrong today.
Like the use of fossil fuels. In his film screening at the exhibition, Julien Charrier displays fireworks running in reverse over an oil rig. Fossil fuel that humankind has brought to the surface, banished back to the Earth's interior. If only it were that simple.
A lot of very impressive works there. I'm afraid we've come to the very end of this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed the program. do join us again next week. I am Sandra Twinovideo, signing off from Kampala, right here in Uganda. Bye, Chris. See you soon.
Bye, Sandra. And of course, it's goodbye to all of you too. We look forward to hearing from you on social media about this or any of our Echo Africa shows. So long from Lagos, Nigeria.